Execution Sentence causes the target to take an additional hit equal to 20% of all holy damage dealt over the next 10 seconds. So what happens if you spend the entire 10-second window stacking and empowering as much holy damage as possible? Every stat choice and every talent will be pushed toward making the short burst window as lethal as possible. The March 17 class tuning gave Red Pals some very meaningful damage buffs: 15% increased damage to Final Verdict, 25% increased damage to Templar Slash and High Lord's Judgment, and most importantly, Blizzard also fixed Execution Sentence so that it now correctly deals 20% of the holy damage dealt to the target, instead of the bugged 10% it had been using before. If it's been a bug this whole time, Blizzard owe us an apology. So today's build is to test these buffs and to make that 10-second execution sentence window as overloaded with holy damage as possible. For stats, prioritize Mastery. Mastery not only increases your holy damage directly, but also has an additional effect that can randomly blast the target with extra holy damage. That interaction becomes even better when paired with Boundless Judgment, since that talent increases the trigger chance of that extra holy blast effect by 50%, giving Mastery even more value than it would normally have on paper. As for Critical Strike and Haste, those can already be pushed upward temporarily through several talents and burst effects that I'll explain later. So instead of trying to balance everything evenly, I decided to commit as hard as possible to the stat that most directly amplifies the damage profile we actually care about. That means putting all my available Conquest points and Bloody tokens into Mastery. Next comes the crafted gears. Following the same logic, I'm going to craft 2 rings and 1 necklace with Mastery. Crafting is already complete, one of the nice things about being on a major server. All that's left is to equip them and finish the setup. I'm such an idiot. If you somehow make the same mistake I did and craft 3 pieces with the same embellishment, don't worry. There's still a fix. You can't delete an embellishment directly, but you can overwrite it by recrafting the item with Lucky Keychain. So this is my current setup, including the enchants and gems for extra mastery. My holy damage is increased by 44.4%. The next thing that really matters is the talent setup, because from here on, the entire goal is to identify every talent that can further amplify holy damage. For the hero talent, I chose Templar. If everything has to be forced into a 10-second window, then what you need is a talent tree that actually hammers the target down. On top of that, Undisputed Ruling provides an additional 15% haste, which helps compress even more damage into that short burst window. And Seal of the Templar further increases the damage of Final Verdict by 25%. And most importantly, make sure to use the Wake of Ashes Hammer of Light combo because it is one of the key building blocks of the entire burst setup. As for the Paladin talents, Greater Judgment is absolutely mandatory because it causes the target to take 20% increased damage from your next holy power ability. That means in any proper burst sequence, Judgment must always be applied first. Next is Divine Toll. I am pairing it with Divine Resonance because this build is fundamentally designed to cycle around Avenging Wrath, which naturally comes back every 1 minute. And with the Mastery focus setup, Judgment will often trigger Mastery High Lord's Judgment, which means every Judgment will add even more holy damage. On top of that, the Hammer of Wrath talent can temporarily replace Judgment with Hammer of Wrath, which upgrades a hit from the usual Holy Strike damage into a pure holy damage. Next are the Retribution talents, and I'll keep this part focused on the key ones. First, Avenging Wrath helps cover the build's naturally lower critical strike chance while also increasing your damage by another 20%. Since Avenging Wrath and Divine Toll both operate on the same 1 minute cooldown, I'm just going to bind them together in a macro and use them at the same time. Then, to push your holy damage even further, take Holy Flames and Judge, Jury, and Executioner talent, giving you a combined 10% increase to holy damage. After that, choose Templar Strikes, which converts Crusader Strike from a physical damage button into Templar Strike, giving it a radiant damage profile. The Apex talent is also extremely important here because it causes Art of War to heavily empower Blade of Justice. And finally, although it is conditional on Avenging Wrath being active, Final Verdict can be paired with Jurisdiction and Seal of the Templar to reach a total of 55% increased damage. Now everything is in place. Before committing to the burst, Start by casting Judgment and Blade of Justice, so the target is already set up to take increased damage from your Holy Power abilities. Once the setup is ready, the combo is very straightforward. Avenging Wrath and Divine Toll, Execution Sentence, Final Verdict, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and then from there, you simply rebuild Holy Power and fit in as many additional Final Verdicts as possible during the next 10 seconds. And that is what makes the build so dangerous. The burst itself is already strong, but because of Execution Sentence, the target then takes an additional hit equal to 20% of all the holy damage dealt during that window. Since the whole sequence lines up in a 1-minute cycle, this gives you a reliable kill window over and over again. Another major advantage of this build is that the vast majority of its damage is holy damage, which means unlike physical damage, it is not reduced by target's armor. So this setup does not really care whether the enemy is wearing cloth or plate, casters, melee, lightly armored or heavily armored, it doesn't matter. They all get burned down the same way. Red Pal's one real weakness is the lack of Mortal Strike effect, since the spec has no built-in healing reduction. But if you're able to spend those 10 seconds, forcing as much fully amplified holy damage into the target as possible, the real question becomes this: will healing even be enough to save them in the first place? This build makes you feel like a true champion of justice, burning down evil before it has time to recover. Now let's move into some actual gameplay. This is a blitz match on Silver Shard Mines, and ideally, you want to decide in advance who is going to each cart before the game even starts. In this lobby, it looked like the Rogue, Hunter, and I would be the best choices to play off-cart role. But as anyone who has played Blitz already knows, not every team is going to communicate properly, and there are always going to be players who simply ignore the plan and do their own thing. Fortunately, it looked like the enemy team was dealing with the exact same problem. That's all, and don't forget to check the comments.